No problem, no problem. I'm just giving her a lot now.
Hello. 1, 2, 3. Nirmala Hridayaya.
Namaskarams to one and all present here. We're very pleased to welcome you all to today's talk by Sri Naresh Keerthi on the topic Sarasa Sangeeta Sahitya, Understanding Invention and Convention in Muthuswami Dikshitar's language as part of the Dikshita 250 celebrations. Sri Naresh Keerthi is an assistant professor of Sanskrit at the Ashoka University. Formerly, he has taught Sanskrit at the Hebrew University, Jerusalem, and Chinmaya Vishwavidyapith, Kerala. He has conducted doctoral research on the semantics of color in Sanskrit at the National Institute of Advanced Studies, Bangalore. Sri Naresh Keerthi's interests include Kavya and Natya literature of Sanskrit, Prakrit, and their mutual interactions with the literary cultures of South India. He studies topics at the intersection of the lexicon, grammar, and poetics, and is investigating the development of poetic topoi in Kavya literature. Sri Naresh Keerthi is also interested in the history of classical music and musicology in South India and the early modern period. We're very glad you could be a part of this celebration, sir. Thank you so much for being here today. I now request Sri Hariharan, sir, to honor Sri Naresh Keerthi on behalf of Guru Guhamrita.
Thank you. Thank you. May I begin? Okay, great. So the topic I've taken for this talk, Ravi Kiran told me to speak about the sahitya of Muthuswami Dikshita. And lots of things can be said about sahitya in general, the lyrics of Dikshitar in particular, and also about this benighted question that people often ask about the relation between lyrics and music. And I feel we mostly think about this question in a very coarse way. We don't have a sophisticated enough way of posing these questions. Perhaps, I don't promise anything, in the course of today's talk, using the songs of Dikshitar, we could get one alternative way of looking at the role of the words in songs. You don't have to agree with me. It's still ideas in progress. I'd like to start by thanking G. Ravi Kiran and his organization, Guru Guhamrita, for this invitation. Many years ago, when he already was doing something like this in Bangalore, I don't know if it was called Guru Guhamrita then, I went to one of the competitions as a school kid and very foolhardily gave a list of songs which included things like Hastivadanaya Namastubhyam, Tyagaraja Yoga Vibhavam, and so on. And of course, there were people who sang much better. And I feel somehow this is Ravi Kiran, the cycle coming whole, that I'm coming to his event here and speaking a bit about Dikshitar songs. Now, he's asked me to speak about the language of Muthuswami Dikshita. And I know language is a sticky topic in Tamil Nadu today, especially the language that Dikshitar used. Let me assure you, I have no intention of imposing any language on the citizens of Chennai or Tamil Nadu. I've barely succeeded in imposing Sanskrit on the students who come willingly to study it from me in faraway Haryana. If anything, I'll probably try and convince you that Dikshitar isn't so much concerned with language, at least not in the way we might usually think. I also apologize for not speaking in Tamil. I don't have the level of Tamil that one would need to make a technical lecture. I'm very envious of the other speakers who had such excellent, fluent Tamil. Now, to understand the songs of Muthuswami Dikshitar and what might have been the sources for him and his contemporaries, we have to understand the period a little bit. So the centuries preceding them, between the 16th and the 18th centuries, scholars, especially people who are interested in world history and history of ideas, they speak of this as the early modern period. Scholars say that the early modern period is characterized by greater global connectivity. There were these networks of trade and travel. It was and as a consequence of more travel, there was more curiosity. There was a greater awareness about other peoples and their cultures. And there was also curiosity earlier, but there's a difference because at this time, curiosity is considered a virtue. It's considered a positive quality. We also see a sharper emergence of a sense of the individual. You don't identify in terms of some circle of community or region or language or religious practice. Of course, you do identify by those things as well, but also the individual is being kind of outlined in a sharper and sharper way, and also at the same time, a sense of individual style. So earlier, everybody who wrote a verse Mahakavya, they aspired to write like Kalidasa. But we see gradually that someone else, we are speaking today about Muthuswami Dikshitar, there was not too far away from his time, there was a celebrated family of scholars, partly in Kanchipuram district, partly in the Kaveri Delta, the family of Appaya Dikshitar and Nilakantha Dikshitar. And when Nilakantha Dikshitar writes a poem, which is on the story of Shiva, the churning of the ocean, the poison coming out, he calls it the Nilakantha Vijaya. Now, this poem, what does the title tell us about? So at one level, and perhaps at first flush, we would think that, of course, it's about the victory of Shiva, who swallowed the poison, his kantha became Nila, and the world was saved. But if we gaze at it a little longer, the poet has also inserted himself. So this poem is also a tribute to his literary success. It's the Vijaya also of the Nilakantha who's writing this poem. So you see that like a fractal where there's a smaller image and there's a bigger image. There is Shiva Nilakantha, but also the poet Nilakantha. So we see this emergence of a sense of individual style. So Nilakantha Dikshitar, of course, he wanted to write in the same chaste idiom as Kalidasa, but he also wanted to write like Nilakantha Dikshitar. And this, we couldn't say this is entirely new, but this is something that is intensified in this period. So scholars like Velcheru Narayan Rao, David Shulman, and Sanjay Subramaniam, not the Sangeeta Kalanidhi, the history Kalanidhi, they've made a case for a similar early modernity emerging also in South India. And especially the case is made that this early modernity in South India is marked by a profusion of experiments in every domain. It's marked by the emergence of hybridity. And this kind of hybridity is a consequence both of travel and curiosity. And the most important point to be made is that the early modernity that we see in South India in this period, while this part was connected both through trade and in other ways with the rest of the world, this is an early modernity that did not emerge because of European contact, not because of the colonial presence, not because of the missionary presence. Of course, they were there. Of course, they played a part in it, but this was largely a homegrown movement. There was a series of groundswells which had many centers, and we see that especially in the arts, in the creative arts, in literature, in theater, in music. And I think this is quite convincing. And so newness is kind of a signature of this period, which, if we like, we can bookend with musicologists like Kalinatha at one end, and musicians like certainly Muthuswami Dikshita, but perhaps all the way down to Subbarama Dikshita at the other end. So we even see that in this period, scholarship became self-aware, and they spoke about older styles and newer styles. So people who were writing literary theory, Alankara Shastra, they made a distinction between the Navyas, the avant-garde, and the Prachinas, those who follow the old style. People who are working in the fields of Jyotisha, astronomy, people who are working in Nyaya, that is formal logic, they spoke of the old school, the Prachinas, Prachina Nayayika, and they spoke about us. We are the modern, we are the up-to-date Nayayikas. And if any of you had the opportunity, I'm sure many of you, to look at the Sangeeta Sampradaya Pradarshini, these terms are also borrowed by Subbarama Dikshita, and he uses it in a very interesting way. He uses it as kind of a code. So when he says the Prachinulu, and I don't think he always, he says Navinulu, sometimes he says Prachinulu, and sometimes he will say those who know the Shastra, those who know the Lakshana, when he means those who adhere to his school. When he wants to say people who are following the school of Venkatamakhin, he'll say those who know the Lakshana. So it's very interesting that we see this kind of awareness of one's own discipline, of a sense of history within the discipline, and so on. All this talk of hybridization and novelty is very well. Innovation may well be a hallmark of this period, but there's a little problem, which is that in pre-modern India, innovation is this kind of rare beast. It's like a unicorn. It is present, it might be there, it might be very close to you, it might be right in front of you, but you may not see it. Or if you see it, you may not recognize it. So if our current predicament is one where we are obsessed with claims of freshness, uniqueness, newness, we are hollering all the time, never before, Puttam Pudiya, from the rooftops, the pre-moderns went in the opposite direction. Even if they innovated, the tendency was to understate the innovation, or to conceal it, or to deny it. So in a way, you could say that what they would do is not old wine in new bottles, but new wine in old bottles. You may have an innovation, but you say, oh, but this is just continuing what the scholars were doing. And musicians and scholars more competent than I will be able to tell you how much individuals like Ramaswamy Dikshita, Muthuswamy Dikshita, Subbarama Dikshita each had to play in this kind of reimagining and reconfiguration of ragas as well as genres that they were composing in. You may think that it is the same Ardra Deshi that Muthuswamy Dikshita is writing a song in which Subbarama Dikshita is writing a Sanchari, in which you find Suladi or a song of a Haridasa. But when we gaze intently, we see that there's something more. And we see that there are many, many cases of new wine in old bottles. You may find Sthalapurana wine in a Kirtana bottle. You may find Dhyana Shloka wine in a Kirtana bottle. And you'll find instances of one register of music braided into another register of music, like the Russian Matrushka doll. What do we mean by music braided into music? I think people in Tamil Nadu who are exposed to so many good songs in all of these languages, classical, cinema, and all of this, you may not notice the rarity and the difficulty of a good song coming into being. First, you need poetic ideas, ideas that are not too banal, not too complicated. You need to express it in elegant words. You need pleasing diction. And then you have to pour this expression into a mold of rhythm that is just right. And we haven't even gotten to the melody. We haven't even gotten to raga yet. Let me give you an example from someone that I think is the Copernicus of the Sanskrit lyric, the person who proved that it was possible to write song in Sanskrit. So he wanted to say, dear, spit out this anger. It is pointless. If you're that cross at me, hurt me. Use your nails. Use your teeth. Handcuff me with your arms. Whatever will calm you, dear, spit out this anger. And how does it come out in his words? He says, Satyamevasi yadi sudati mayi kopini Dehi khara nakhara shara ghatam Ghataya bhuja bandhanam rachayarada khandanam yenava bhavati sukhajatam charushile priye munchamayimana manidanam. This is from the penultimate, or no, this is from one of the songs in the Gita Govinda, the song famously which goes Vadasi yadi kinchidapi dantaruchi kaumudi. And you can see, I didn't even sing it, there's a standard, very charming tune in Mukhari that it's sung in South India. And without even getting distracted, if I may use that term, by the music, you can notice that there is already a thread of musicality in the choices of the sounds. I kind of gave it out to you by telling you the meaning, and that is actually a distraction. But forget the meaning. Think of it as a song in Korean. And when you listen to this juxtaposition of the sounds, then you can notice that there is a distinct register of musicality here. And this is a musicality of the varnas, of the sound, not the musical swaras, but of the phonemes that are put together to make this song. And Subbarama Dikshita, in his splendid Vagyakara Charitamu, he says that Ramaswamy Dikshita used to sing the Gita Govinda every fortnight in his house. And I wouldn't be surprised if this had an impact on Muthuswamy Dikshita and his siblings in developing a sense of what constitutes musical Sanskrit. A good song, a memorable song, is about this kind of alchemy between two registers of musicality. And this is what perhaps Tyagaraja encoded in a song that on the face of it seems to be about Rama, but I think is actually about music. So there's a Yadukula Kamboji song which goes, Nidayache Nityanandudaiti. Then he describes Rama as being Nada Brahmanandamrita Rasakriti Gala, saying you have the form of the rasa, the relish, that is the ananda, the pleasure of nada, of sound. And then he goes on to describe him as Suswaramaya Bhusha. He's ornamented by swara, and Vagchelavrata. He's wrapped in the clothes that is speech. So who's being spoken about here? Is this some blue-colored person holding a bow and arrow? And why would they be ornamented with notes and with clothes, with words? Clearly, this is a description of music. This is the thing, or perhaps one of the things that Tyagaraja worshipped. He was thinking about musicality, which is made up of the interbreeding of two kinds of music: the music of the words and the music of the tune. But it's very difficult. It's very difficult to be a Sanskrit Kirtana, even to be a Sanskritish Kirtana. Because the song, as I said, has to speak in two languages simultaneously. Think of Vidushi's Brinda and Mukta, or MS and Radha harmonizing, where one was singing in the lower octave and one was singing in the higher octave. This is what is happening when you have the musicality of the words and the music itself harmonized. I'll give you some examples going backwards from the more recent song to the more ancient song. You'll forgive me if I try to sing. This is from a composition of Subbarama Dikshita. Tripuradya Gamavedya Tripurukutsaradya Tripura Vairi Mohitaga Tripura Kritaga Vidatri Tripura Sundari. He's chosen a kind of difficult beginning. He has this two consonant combination, tra, which instinctively is a bit harsh on the ear. But he manages very cleverly to kind of stack it. Tripuradya Gamavedya Atri Purukutsaradya. But there's this kind of fluidity which makes it flow. Similarly, this is an example from Subbaraya Shastri. Manavini vinuni nune vet kuntini vanaruha bhava danujari puvinuta pada. Vanaruha bhavada nujari puvinuta pada. So you have a gap of 6 plus 5 plus 5 syllables there. Vanaruha bhava is Brahma, one who is bhava, one who is born out of lotuses, Vanaruha. Danuja Ripu, the enemy of all the demons, is Vishnu. Vinutapada, one whose feet are worshipped by Brahma and Vishnu. You could have said this in 10 other ways in that gap of 6 plus 5 syllables. He could have said, Dhatrendra dhokshaja vandita pada. And you'll think I'm abusing somebody. Is it? It has the same meaning. Dhatra is Brahma. I even added a bonus. Indra is another deity. Adhokshaja is Vishnu. And by themselves, the words are very lofty sounding. But then, is it musical? So what was it that they were attending to? On the one hand, we know that it is not that lyrics weren't important. If that was the case, why do you have to sing Karu, Vel, Pulu, Ni, Sari, Karu? You could sing Kar, Vepalai, Pachadi, something. Yes? So clearly you did have particular things you wanted to say. You wanted to say musical things. They were very devout. They wanted to speak about this deity for whom they feel a deep, deep, intense emotion. But also in the choices of their words, in the choices of their sounds, there was another criterion. And this criterion was this musicality of the sounds. And now an example from Muthuswami Dikshita. Nirmala hridaya viharaya haraya Nilambara karaya Shri karaya. If you look at the landings in each avarta, Nirmala hridaya viharaya, and now let's even stop paying attention to the meaning because we are looking at the sounds. You have Nirmala hridaya viharaya. Yes? Forget the meaning. You all know the word vihara. Nirmala hridaya viharaya. And what's the next word? Haraya. The first one ends on haraya with a long ha and then raya. The second word is haraya with a short ha. The next clause, Nilambara karaya with a long ka, Shri karaya with a short ka. So what is happening? If you're reading this as poetry, there is no rhyme between viharaya and haraya. There is no rhyme between Shri akaraya and Shri karaya. Do you think it was so hard for Muthuswami Dikshita to find some other word that rhymes with haraya and with akaraya? But the moment we see this not as a poem, but as a song, the moment you see it in its musical setting, the phonetic short vowel, the phonetic hrasva, becomes a musical dirgha. There's this quality of elasticity that comes the moment you're not counting light and heavy syllables, but the moment you're in the world of song. And you may want to think of other similar examples from the domain of songs by the Tanjore, the Tiruvarur Trinity. The most famous example I can think of from Tyagaraja is the song that goes, Darini telusu konti, Tripura sundari ninne sharananti. How do Dari and Dari correspond to each other? If you were writing Telugu poetry, if Tyagaraja had to go submit this to the Andhra Sahitya Academy, perhaps it wouldn't pass muster. But the moment it is song, Darini, though it has a long consonant, and Tripura Sundari, though it has a short consonant, they are harmonious with each other. And this kind of magic, this use of Nirmala hridaya viharaya haraya, Nilambara karaya Shri karaya, is certainly not a mistake. It cannot be a mistake. Okay, now I have two case studies to give you from the songs of Muthuswami Dikshita. It's going to be a little bit of a lesson in grammar. There's something in, there's the past participle that we use in Sanskrit. Now, the equivalent of it in Tamil is what is called the Vinay Echam, which means a non-finite form of a verb. You would have seen examples of the past participle. It's not as scary as it sounds. past participles are usually made by taking a verb and adding the or adding ita after it. So you say you have the verb drish, which means to see. If you wanted to say seen, you say drish plus the, drishta. If you have the verb save, which means to serve, you add ita to it. You say sevita, which means to be served. Now this form is the past participle. It's not so daunting, isn't it? I'm sure you've all encountered words of this form. So moving on, if we have to use the past participle in a compound, it's a bit tricky. You know what a compound is? When we, for the sake of brevity, we put words together. I think it's called kuttuchol in Tamil. So if we wanted to say, somebody is struck by sorrow. The verb you use for striking or killing is han, to kill or to strike. So if you wanted to make the past participle, it would be hata. Yes? It's a somewhat familiar word. Somebody who is struck by sorrow, the compound would be dukkha hata. Yes? Dukkha is the word for sorrow. Hata is struck. So if you see the compound dukkha hata, it's not talking about dukkha, it's not talking about striking, it's talking about a word outside the compound. Somebody who is struck by sorrow. At the same time, if we made a new compound with the two words interchanged, if we had hata dukkha, what do you think this word would mean? It means someone who has struck down sorrow. So if you have the compound where the participle is in the first position, it means they have done the action. If you have a compound where the participle is in the second position, it means the action is happening to them. So you would say, dukkha hataha virahi. So somebody who's in love and they are pining away for their sweetheart, they are dukkha hata, they are stricken by sorrow. Whereas hata dukkha yogi. A yogi is a person who's managed to destroy all their pains, destroy all their sorrows. So if we say guru sevitaha, what would that mean? It would mean somebody who is served by a guru. Guru sevitaha harihi. Vishnu who is served by the guru. But if we have sevita guruhu, what would it mean? One who is served their teacher. One who is served their teacher. Now that we have this, sorry for the grammar lesson, but now that we have this information, let's look at the use of past participles in the songs of Muthuswami Dikshitar. Now, I'm a little more scared now that Sri Ram Kumar is in the room, but he'll correct me if there's a mistake in the words of the songs. So in this Abhogi song, there's the word Neela Megha Jita Shyamala Gatram. Yes? Following the principle that I just said, what would this mean? Neela Megha, the dark cloud. Jita, surpassed or conquered. Shyamala Gatram. Remember the principle we spoke about? If the participle comes before something, then that is the object of the action. What is the last word here? Shyamala Gatram. This is describing Varaha. What does it mean? His Shyamala Gatra, his dark body, his Jita, is conquered by Neela Megha. Does that sound right? Do you think in the song you would say some object of comparison is better than the subject that we're talking about? So this makes us worry for a moment, isn't it? And then let's look at some more examples. You have Bhutadi Sansevita Charanam. Familiar example? Everyone knows this? Is there anyone who hasn't heard this in a song? This is from Vatapi Ganapatim Bhajeham. So, Sansevita Charanam. This fits our paradigm, isn't it? The Charana is Sansevita. The feet are worshipped. Bhutadi Sansevita Charanam. The feet are worshipped by the Bhutas, the Ganas, and so on. Similarly, from the Devagandhari song, Kshitija Ramanam Chintaye, you have Kshitipati Nuta Charanam. It's fine going backwards. Someone who has Charanam, whose feet are Nuta, are worshipped by Kshitipati, by kings. So even if you see it in singular in a compound, we can take it as the plural. That's fine. There's no problem with that. It's actually, it has to be represented in the singular. You can't say one whose feet are worshipped by many Kshitipatis in the compound. Similarly, in the same song, Palita Bhaktam, going backwards, what does it mean? Somebody who is palita, protected devotees. So far, so good. And I can amplify examples. So in the same song, you have Veeranuta Bhuja Balam, and then in another song, I think this is Chakra Nivarita Bhaskara Prakasham. Which song is this? Is the Rupavati song, Shri Krishnam Bhaja. So this is describing Krishna. The line goes Chakra Nivarita Bhaskara Prakasham. The structure is fine. Bhaskara Prakasham, the light of the sun, is Nivarita, is blotted out. Chakra, good. It's the same paradigm as we've seen earlier, like Bhutadi Samsevita Charanam. Another example, Kama Janaka Bharatisha Sevita. Yes, this is an example of a paradigm. Why? We have the one who does the action followed by the verb. Kama Janaka is the father of Kama, that is Vishnu. Bharatisha is the husband of Bharati, Saraswati, that's Brahma, Sevita. So the whole compound refers to Shanmukha, who is Sevita, served by Kama Janaka, that's Vishnu and Brahma. In the same song you have Naradadi Bhavita, one who is Bhavita, one who is meditated by Narada and others like him. But in the same songs, like we had Bhutadi Samsevita Charanam, we have Vinata Yoginam. We don't have Yogi Vinatam. Yes? What would Vinata Yoginam mean? If we remember our old examples, it would mean one who bows down to yogis. Similarly, in the Devagandhari song, where we had Kshitipati Nuta Charanam, one whose feet are paid respect to by the kings, we have Sevita Vibhishanam. What would this mean? At first flush, if you were to follow what you see in Kavya Samskrita, you would say this means that Rama, he served Vibhishana. And again, I can amplify examples. So, like we saw Kama Janaka Bharatisha Sevita, we have Varijastra Sammohitakara. Yes? Akara, form, which is sammohita, which is hypnotized or which is overcome by Varijastra, by Kama. Do you think ever I would write a song on Swaminatha and say, you are nice, but you are overcome by Manmatha? It's impossible. Obviously, the intention is to say, Akara sammohita Varijastra. That is the intention of this line. But why does he say this? And this is not in one place or another place to say that it's a copyist's error. Somehow people forgot. It's not in one or two places. Yes, in the Brindavana Saranga song, you have Shambara Vairi Janakam Sannuta Shuka Shaunakam. It's the same as Vinuta Yoginam. Yes, at first flush, it looks like you're saying, who's this deity? Saundara Raja. Saundara Raja is worshipping Shuka and Shaunaka. That's the impression you would get. Now, we have to, as the Telugu scholars of Vedanta would say, Samadhanam Chappandi. Now you have to give an explanation. What is the explanation? Is Muthuswami Dikshita weak in grammar? No. The explanation is the same Pallavi that I've been singing since the beginning, which is that musicality in these cases, it supervenes the grammar. In all of these examples, there is a motivation from the rhyme or the alliteration or the anuprasa. So you're saying, Kshitipati Nuta Charanam, Sevita Vibhishanam, Kshitijaramanam. And so you see that in this kind of flow, in the flow of keeping the musicality of the sounds going, he's making this kind of choice. That's the first level of explanation. But we can also think of more. We can think of a second level of explanation. We all think of Muthuswami Dikshita primarily as a Sanskrit composer. But how much Sanskrit was he exposed to? The good question to ask is, what else was he exposed to? Did he grow up listening to a lot of Sanskrit? Did he speak Sanskrit at home? What did he listen to? How many Sanskrit songs does Ramaswamy Dikshita have? Anybody off the surviving corpus? Can you name a Sanskrit song of Ramaswamy Dikshita? We have one so far. Shambho Jagadisha, exactly. There is one Shankarabharanam song which is fully in Sanskrit, but the bulk of his songs are in Telugu. And it's very plausible that Muthuswami Dikshitar's poetic thoughts were primarily in a Dravidian language. Now, as I was telling you at the beginning, the Tamil equivalent of the past participle is what is called the Vinay Echam. So if you, like you would say Sevita, you would say Sevitta in Tamil. You would say Seida. These would be the th or the da is what you add to the verbal root to make the past participle in Tamil, and it's similar in Kannada and in Telugu and so on. And there's a very special quality to this past participle in the Dravidian languages. So you could say Pirai Ani Irai, where Ani is the verb, and this Ani form is the Vinayacham. Now, if you don't have any other information, you don't have a sentence, you just have this clause, strictly speaking, we don't know who is anifying whom. It could be the Pirai, the moon, that is bearing a deity inside it, or it could be a deity, which is more likely the case because we know the story, Shiva, who's bearing the moon. Another example would be Kunrani Peruman. So Ani, again using the same verb. So if you know the story, it could mean a Peruman, a deity, who's holding a Kundra, a mountain. Or if you don't know the context, if you are reading it in a poem for the first time, it could be the deity who's held up by the mountain. There could be a deity on top of the mountain. So my Tamil teacher, to make it memorable, he'd give me an example. I don't know if I'll get scolded for saying this here. He'd give this example of Nai Kaditta Manidan. So when we see this clause with no background, we don't know if the dog bit the man or the man bit the dog. Which means, on a serious note, that this kind of past participle in Tamil has the quality of bidirectionality. You could say Kadita Manidan, Kadita Nai, or Nai Kadita Manidan, and get the sense that either this one could be the subject or that one could be the subject. And this is a feature of this ambiguity is not just allowed, it's perhaps even cherished in the Dravidian languages. And I hope it's not a case of Rasikar Yarupiya Pechalar by discussing this example in front of you. And this perhaps would be a way to explain the unusual use of these past participles by Muthuswami Dikshitar. There are a few more such unusual elements when he uses compounds with a comparison. So the word for comparison, there are two major figures. There is the simile, upama, and the rupaka, which is the metaphor. In Tamil, also the upama is called uvamai. Now, how do we represent a comparison in a compound? So what are the elements of a comparison? You have the subject, the thing you're talking about, the face, and you have the standard, the thing that it is being compared to, the moon. Now, when we make a compound where you have the subject first, followed by the standard. So if you say Mukha Chandra, this compound describes faces. But if you have the standard first, if you say Chandra Mukha, then this describes somebody outside the compound. It describes a person who has a face like the moon. This is kind of standard practice in the use of compounds while making comparisons. So positive examples would be Swaprakasha Jita Somagni Patangam. His prakasha, his lustre, it conquers the Soma Agni Patanga, the moon, fire, and the sun. Nutana Nirada Sadrisha Shariram, one whose body is comparable to a fresh rain cloud. But then there are also unusual constructions of comparisons in compounds. So when you have Neela Nirada Sharira, it doesn't mean a body that is blue like a cloud. It means one who has a cloud for a body. When you say Neela Megha Gatram, it doesn't mean one who has a body that is like a cloud. It means one who has a cloud for a body. When you say Vadana Shashanke, so this is in the Begada song, Shri Maharagni Vadana Shashanke, It doesn't mean one whose face is like the moon. It means one who has the moon as their face. You would have to say Shashanka Vadane. Similarly, Gala Jita Shankhe, Punnaga Varali Vijita Venya. All of these are examples of compounds where the syntax isn't what you would expect from Kavya Sanskrita. And what is the point of this? Because understandably, I'm bringing up the examples which are not standard. For 7 of these non-standard examples, there are 100 correct examples. So you must not think that I'm giving Muthuswami Dikshita a report card. The question to ask is, why did these pass muster with him? These passed muster with him. These passed muster with Subbarama Dikshita, who was well-trained both in Vyakarana and in Kavya, who had studied Telugu, who had studied Sanskrit very well. My last topic is that there's this rather basic element of grammar, which is the phenomenon called sandhi. When you have sounds at the end of the first word and sounds at the beginning of the next word, when they interact, then there's some change. They combine, either one sound is dropped or a new sound is introduced. This is kind of the early lesson that everybody studies while studying Sanskrit. And there are instances of non-standard sandhi in Muthuswami Dikshita. So in 2 places where he's using the signature, the name of the raga Arabhi, he will say samsara bhityapahe. So if you have bhiti and apahe, it would be bhityapahe. Why is it bhityapahe? And not in one place. If it was in one place, it was only in one place in Subbarama Dikshita's book, we would say it's a typo. He's old man. It was 2 years before he passed away. It's in 2 places. And it's like this also in the other traditions. And surely in Subbarama Dikshita was also a very scrupulous man. I think it would be an insult if he had to pass off something as a typo. Similarly, in the Mukhari song, Pahimam Ratnachala Nayaka, in the end of the song, you have this beautiful passage. Adyapyarya Vamshajata Turyajati Bhrita Khanda Kaveri Nadyodakabhishikta Sharira. So, what is the third line? Nadi, Udaka. If you put together Nadi and Udaka, what does it become? It should become Nadyodakabhishikta Sharira. But the trouble one would land in is, you will miss one matra. If you had Nadyodakadi, you need Nadyodakadi for the next consonant to be Guru. Do you think he wouldn't have noticed Nadyodakadi? Do you think this would have been ignored by Muthuswami Dikshita? And another last example, this is an example from the Surati song on Vanchanatha. He has Shrikara Kashyadhika Phalapradam. It's the same as Samsara Bhityapahe. You have Kashi and then Adhika Phalapradam. So it would have to be Kashyadhika Phalapradam. But clearly here, there is a consideration that is different from those that you have in literary Sanskrit. Not that you jettison all of those principles, but the more prominent principle is one of the musicality. And that is what seems to be driving all of these patterns for Muthuswami Dikshita. He chooses to insert sounds like beads on an abacus, and then the melody kind of is folded along that. So anniversaries are a great time to pay our respects. And I think one of the ways to pay our respects is to revisit all the information we have about these great scholars. And there are many questions that I think haven't been re-examined in a long time. They have been examined in the past, and then we've been repeating those insights. And I think it's a good time now to, while we're doing events like this, to ask some important questions about Dikshita. Did he begin the use of mudra alankara, inserting the mudra of the raga in the songs? Did he begin Madhyamakala? Was he opposed to Narastuti? Did he only use Sudadi talas? Did he not use Chapu talas? And I think we owe the same scrupulous attention to the work of Muthuswami Dikshita and Subbarama Dikshita that we see they gave their own materials. So the detail of attention that Muthuswami Dikshita gave each deity or each shrine that he described, the attention and care that Subbarama Dikshita gave for each song that he notated, for each sanchari that he wrote, the least we could do is to kind of try and reproduce the same attentive care when we look at their songs. Thank you. Are there any questions or any points for discussion, any disagreements even? Yes, please. Should we get you a mic? I can repeat your question if there isn't a mic.
How did he handle the meaning when it comes to inserting the raga's meaning in it? For example, Guru Guha Chamara Bharana. I really don't know much of Sanskrit. So how did he manage to make very good meaning every time he uses a raga mudra? Have you ever thought about that?
Actually, I tried not to think so much about meaning, but I'll still try and answer your question. Which song is this from? Guru Guha Chamara Bharanam?
Shanmukha Priya.
Okay, so it's on
Guru Guha
the Ketu. Is it the Ketu song or the Rahu song?
Guru Guha
Perhaps.
Chamara Bharanam.
I see.
Gunadosha
So-
Chida Bharanam.
Okay, so perhaps one who holds Bharana, the Chamara for Guru. But see, inserting a word like Chamara is no big deal for Muthuswami Dikshita. This is you can do in your sleep. Chamara is a full word. Chamara is also a poetic word. You know what a Chamara is? So if you go to many temples here, you'll find that they have
a hand fan?
no, not this fan which has
okay.
palm leaf in it. Not I saw somebody here gesturing. It's not this fan. It's this fan. The one that looks like cheerleaders' pom-poms, which are made out of the tail of a yak.
Okay.
Yes, so that's a chamara. The chamara is very special because it is only allowed for two kinds of personages. It's allowed for a chakravartin and it's allowed for God. So a white umbrella, a chhatra and a chamara, these are signs of being a sovereign, of being but not even a small-time king, but of being a chakravartin. So poetry.
Other ragas?
Yes, and this I think we have heard about it so many times in great detail. The difficult ones are names like Surati, are names like Begada, and Navroj. These the Kuranji. These are names which are hard to insert inside a song. But you know, we should just go back one generation and look at the way Ramaswamy Dikshita has done it. So he's kind of set the example. Though I think to be fair, I must say, this kind of little acrobatic is a little bit easier in Telugu or in Tamil than in Sanskrit. Because especially if you have sounds like the dakara, you know, these are phonological problems one may not have thought about. There are not so many words in Sanskrit that begin with ba. If you wanted to do something, say you wanted to write a verse where every line at the yatisthana has ba, after 6 words you will run out of words with ba. You will use a word with va, and va initial words can be used with ba. You will have to do some such acrobatic. So there are particular blind spots in every language, and we are impressed by Dikshitar's use of the raga mudra, and rightly we should be. But this is actually, again, at the risk of offending someone, this is the less impressive thing. I think when he's able to compose in a chaputala, this kind of almost boneless grace where he says, Mama ka hridaya nivasa Shri nivasa. And what is it after that? So anyway, Maruti Prabhriti Dasa Vishwasa. This is harder to do. I think if you visit these performances called Avadhana, Ashtavadhana and Shatavadhana and so on, they have explicitly one division where you give them a challenge to compose a verse on some topic. It can be in praise of God. It can be about something. You can give a contemporary topic. You can say about the language policy or some such topic. And then you give them 4 words. You give them 4 incongruous words, perhaps not even from the same language, and you say you have to write a verse which has chapati, which has puri, which has something else. And he will say, Bhaktan cha pati, meaning he also protects his bhaktas. Karuna purita. And so this is child's play. Again, not to diminish Dikshitar's skill and craft in this, but he has done far more difficult things. And the far more difficult things are finding musical words to express all of that content, which otherwise you would have expressed in verse, and there's a different phonoaesthetics for verse. But to do this in song, and really if you think about it, the charana of Sri Rajagopala, which doesn't have any such fancy footwork, I think is more difficult. If it were not more difficult, we would have had 7 songs which are at the same level. I don't know if I conveyed it convincingly.
Thank
But
you so much.
Your point on Sandhi, so do you recommend singing, how to sing this Kruti, Sri Mahaganapati?
Sri Mahaganapati Ravatu Mam.
Because, yeah. Yeah.
So it's a good point that Vidwan R.K. Sri Ramkumar is making, which is that we find that in the popular oral tradition, there is a strong version of Sri Mahaganapati Ravatu Mam. And is it
even in the Pradarshini, while Subramanya Dikshitar includes all the sandhis in Kritis like the Panchamavarnam, the Shashthavarnam, the Kamalamba, 5th and 6th Avarnams, he marks it as the ending as no in all the lines in the Charanam.
Thank you. I think this is a lovely example, and it is another evidence. If for a moment, just in a thought experiment, we were lawyers on opposite side, it is an evidence in my side. Because again here, so the thing is, Sri Mahaganapati Ravatumam, all the names of Ganesha and all the epithets of Ganesha are in the first case, in the first vibhakti. So it all ends on a visarga. So you will have Mahaganapati. But then, because you have Avatu, it's replaced by a ra, so it becomes easy to sing. But then further on in the song, you will have, give me an example where it comes before a kakar or
But
a
actually,
pakara.
no, you can actually, but Kama Janaka, Shri Mahaganapati Ravatu, Kama Janaka Vidhindra Sannuta, Kamalalaya Tata Nivasa.
Yes,
Komalatara.
that's right, yes.
So it should be sung.
Correct. So if we were to sing it as one continuous sentence, then we would sing Kamalalaya Tatanivasah Komala. This is a special sound. It's called the Jihva Mulya. It's a guttural sound similar to the sound you hear in Arabic, for example. The thing is, and here I'll give 50% of the punya to Muthuswami Dikshita, 50% of the punya to Subbarama Dikshita. They are not writing Sanskrit sentences. They are writing song. So they are looking for a euphonious ending. And I feel he intended it not to be the Kamalalaya Tatanivaso. He intended it to be the okaras because you treat it as the end of a line. And how is it the end of the line? It's the end of an avarta because you can also repeat it. And we realize the wisdom of this when we look at one of the sources, and this is not the topic for this talk, I'm going to finish soon. We should listen to Sri Ram Kumar speak about Shankarabharana.
No, please.
Yeah. There is one of the predecessors of Muthuswami Dikshita's Vibhakti songs on Kamalamba is a set of songs, a cycle of songs written by this scholar from Kanchipuram, whom we know by his title, Upanishad Brahmendra Yogin. He has a set of songs which I don't know if he intended to be labeled that way, but the manuscript calls it the Ramashtapadi. It doesn't have the quality of, there are many kritis which resemble the Gita Govinda. This one is not quite like that, except in the first song. But what is special is that there is one set of songs where there is one song in each vibhakti. And if you look at how this author has done, and I don't believe at all in comparisons, is he's kind of wimped out. In the beginning of the Pallavi, he'll say, Traipada Ramat Param Nahire, and then the rest of the song will all be in Sambodhana. But look at what Muthuswami Dikshita does. He makes his life difficult. He takes it hard, and throughout the song, most or all of the epithets will be in the 5th or the 4th or the 6th vibhakti. You say Sharvanyaha, Venyaha, and so on, which is hard. And I think one of the things a poet does, and by extension a Vagyakara does, is to kind of stretch the limits of language, to say, can I do more than has been done? Can you do more than has been done? So let us see if indeed the nature of Nada Brahma Nanda Rasa is that it is Vagche Lavrita, then how far can we stretch it without tearing it? And I think these are testimonies to the experiments of Muthuswami Dikshita in this combination of sound and song. That is, so I feel that all the okaras there, perhaps are meant to be okaras. If we start emending, then we will have to emend Maruti Sannuta Nama to Maruti Sannuta Naman. Can you sing a Karvai on a consonant? Will you sing Naman? Then we will have to think about all the aluk compounds like Paradi Chatvari Vagatmakam. You cannot say it that way. If you wanted to start Bowdlerizing, there was this scholar called Bowdler who felt there are many racy bits in Shakespeare, and he started amending Shakespeare. So if he subjected Dikshitar to the same, I think it would be our mistake. I think it is what it is. If you want to write a new song where you think the grammar is very good, where you think the music, please do. Maybe someone will sing it. Seriously, I'm not being facetious. But I do think that aside from our notions of grammar, because there isn't just one grammar, and also there isn't just one register of Sanskrit. So if you look at the Sanskrit of Puranas, especially late medieval Puranas and the Agamas, they have a distinctive style. Forget the Sanskrit of Valmiki and Vyasa, which we say are pre-Paninian, so they are not subject to the same rules of grammar. But there are many little islands of almost dialects of the language, and why not that Muthuswami Dikshitar, living in his moment, reading and listening to the songs that he kind of crafted this language. It's not like he's entirely transformed it, but he's kind of stretched the language a bit. And I feel, I hope I don't sound like an apologist for him, but I feel sincerely this is what it is. Otherwise, why would someone like him refer to Shiva as Guru Guha Kumara in the Mukhari song? If you listen to a word ex Kumara, what would be your first instinct? To say, oh, you are the son of them. But no, the meaning of Guru Guha Kumara is one who has Guru Guha as his son. Yes, in the Saurashtra song on Surya, he says Karna Suno. If you see Karna Suno, what will be your first instinct? One who is the son of Karna. But no, here he intends it to mean one who has Karna as his son. And when we see it in more than one place like this is clearly craft. This is not neglect. This is not because you didn't pay attention. And I think our mistake would be if we held it up to the standards of classical Sanskrit of a certain age. And again, this may sound a bit feeble to some of you, but I'm going to give a secondary evidence, and this is going to be the last thing I say. The fact that somebody who wrote extensively about Muthuswami Dikshitar was perhaps one of the greatest Sanskritists of the last generation, who came from the same place as him, V. Raghavan. Chennai became the center of the Sanskrit world because of the presence of this scholar in that city. He was very fond of Muthuswami Dikshitar. He wrote a Mahakavya. The only Mahakavya he wrote is about the life of Muthuswami Dikshitar. He wrote an English monograph on him for the NCPA, which is kind of standard reference for everyone. And you think if these were indeed such insurmountable problems, and Raghavan was also a very forthright scholar. If you read some of his reviews when he'd write about mistakes people have made, whether it's an Indian scholar or a foreign scholar, he was Prativadi Bhayankara. He would just write in the review saying, this person makes a very fine claim, but it is entirely nonsense. So he would say it in a respectful way, of course. And I don't think if there were indeed such unacceptable problems, he would have kept quiet about it. So I suspect, and again, I give this only a secondary evidence, but I feel Raghavan's appreciation for me, just as in many cases we use what is called apta pramana, is for me evidence that there is something else going on here. And like I said earlier, perhaps these anniversaries give us a good excuse to think about this, to think deeper, to gaze more intently, and to find out what is going on. And with that I stop. Thank you all.